Well, I'm here now with the Minister of Defence for the Netherlands, Ruben Brekelmans. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to Arabiya English.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start by talking to you about Ukraine and the military aid and the other sorts of support that the Netherlands has given to Ukraine. There's a drone project, there's been financial packages. What's the goal? What's Ukraine trying to achieve?
Ukraine wants to hold the line, of course, because we currently see that the fighting is more intense than ever, both at the front line, but also the massive air attacks that Russia is conducting. Hundreds of drones, tens of missiles, also ballistic missiles. And Ukraine needs to be able to defend itself against that. In terms of our support, we always have three priorities. One is the F-16s that we deliver, the fighter jets. It's not only the fighter jets, but also everything else, ammunition, reserve parts that's needed to keep the F-16s in the air. Second is air defense. We invested a lot in it. We also delivered parts of Patriot systems. We were the first country to spend or to invest in the Pearl packages, as it's called. It's the American equipment that's now made available to Ukraine. And third is drones. We invested in different drone initiatives, one of them being the Drone Line initiative. And those are drones that are needed at the front line because Ukraine is facing a massive numbers of course, Russian soldiers, but also Russian military assets. And the only way that Ukraine is able to defend itself against that is by using drones. And we invested in that initiative. It was 500 million for more than 600,000 drones. And those are drones that are made by Ukraine and the ones that are most effective at the front line.
So the Netherlands sounds like it is absolutely one of the staunchest allies Ukraine has out there.
Yeah, that's true. We have been, I think, from the very beginning, we have been one of the leading countries. And sometimes we are leading by, relatively spending more money than others. And sometimes by taking the initiative to be the first to deliver something. F-16s being one of the examples, the Pearl initiative being one of the other examples. And because we do fully understand that Ukraine needs our robust support in order to survive, and also the security of Ukraine and Europe and thus also the Netherlands is very much interconnected. If Russia has a stronger position in Ukraine, then the threat to the rest of Europe and to the NATO alliance at that point is much bigger than if Ukraine is able to hold them back. So the best investment in our own security is investing in the military capabilities of Ukraine.
Do you think the European Union and all EU member states are completely aligned when it comes to supporting Ukraine, or do you think there's been some element of battle fatigue in some countries?
Yeah, what I have seen over the last year is that there has been a divergence. So you have some countries that have been willing and able to step up their efforts and to speed up their efforts. Because of course we all know that the United States is providing less support, so they now make their stocks available, but European countries need to take the lead to spend money for it. So other countries need to step in, and there were quite a few countries that are willing to do that. Norway, Sweden, the Netherlands, Germany, also the UK. The Baltic states is basically the north of Europe. But if you look at the countries more to the south and the southeast of Europe, you do see that they are not spending the same level and that they are not delivering the same level of aid. And that is a problem because it's not only those countries in Northern Europe that are able to provide the total package of support that Ukraine needs every day.
Okay. And you are an advocate of some of Russia's frozen assets in European banks being used in what you've described as a creative way. What does that creativity mean?
What I mean is that those frozen assets can maybe not be used directly in the sense that you take the money and you give it to Ukraine. You need to come up with mechanisms that are legally possible and that are also supported by not only the EU but basically the G7 and in which also the risks that are involved are mutualized, because Belgium, for example, has a relatively large degree of risk because over 100 billion of the frozen assets are inside Belgium. I do think that we need to use those frozen assets because of the reason we just discussed. I do see that Ukraine needs a robust level of support, And the only way that we can fund that is to make sure that we use those frozen assets. Because we need to change the calculus of Russia and of Putin, because now he thinks, if I continue to fight for 3 months or half a year, then he thinks he will be in a better position, so he keeps fighting and not, instead of negotiating. I think the only way to change that calculus is, on the one hand, that we can show that Ukraine is not only receiving support today and tomorrow, but in the next 2 to 3 years. And on the other hand, we increase pressure on Russia by more sanctions, by a better enforcement of sanctions, and also supporting Ukraine with deep strike capabilities. So if Putin feels that in the next 2 to 3 years there is robust support to Ukraine, and the pressure on him economically is only going to increase by sanctions and by deep strikes, then maybe his calculus will change. I think that's the only way to push him towards the negotiation table.
President Trump has made considerable efforts to try to get Mr. Putin to the negotiating table, and the most recent round of discussions, which were going to be held in Budapest, have been called off or suspended at the very least. Why do you think that happened?
I think because the United States also realized that Russia at this point is not willing to negotiate. They are willing to sit at the table, they are willing to appear and to seem to be a constructive partner. But if you then look what they actually say and whether they are willing to compromise or to do any concessions, then the answer is no. And so far the diplomatic efforts as a result have been disappointing because Russia is only talking but they are not negotiating. So as I said, I think we need to increase the pressure on Russia. That's the only way to make them negotiate. And I also say sometimes people in the Netherlands say, we should increase our efforts towards peace. And we should also not only talk about military support, but about diplomacy. But then I say, over the last 4 to 5 months, Ukraine has said we are willing to stop the fighting today. And we are willing to negotiate. We are willing to be serious also about what type of concessions should be at the table. And Russia has not answered that call at all. They have basically said, we are not willing to negotiate. We rather keep bombing you, we keep attacking you, we keep terrorizing the Ukrainian people by taking out the energy infrastructure. So I think the only way to get somewhere is to increase the pressure on Russia.
Do you think it's inevitable, though, that when a deal is struck, that Ukraine will have to surrender some of its sovereign territory?
The answer, and I know it maybe sounds a bit simple, but it's up to Ukraine. I've been to Ukraine now 6 times since the large-scale invasion, 4 times as a minister. Last time was 3 weeks ago. And every time that you're there, every time that I'm there, it makes a big impression on me, the sacrifices that Ukraine is making, but also their resilience and their perseverance. They keep fighting, even though they are facing the hardest winter so far. And after all the sacrifices that Ukraine has made and the Ukrainian people have made, I think it's really up to them to decide what type of concessions they are willing to make. In terms of territory, of course, there's a big difference between freezing the front line and accepting that status quo. That's very different from formally acknowledging that those areas are part of Russia. And we also, when the audience is looking at this, they should also understand how fundamental that difference is. But it's really up to Ukraine to decide what they want to do.
The Netherlands is very much on the radar when it comes to this conflict. Not only have you mentioned yourself in this interview that you are a staunch ally of Ukraine's, but the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, is of course Dutch himself, the former Prime Minister. And I'm wondering whether perhaps that adds some momentum to the Netherlands' desire to be a role model nation in NATO, hence perhaps the decision to increase defence spending. Is that an element? Do you feel an element of pressure having the head of NATO being Dutch? Are you feeling that?
It's more, I think, if you know someone personally, and of course we know, I know Mark Rutte, he's a friend of mine, and also his team, I know his team very well. Of course you have more interaction, so sometimes when there is a NATO meeting, you talk about, okay, what do you want to achieve and how can we help with that? And we are just one of the 32 allies. But of course, if we make a certain statement, then we can also support in achieving something as an alliance. So that's, there is good contact, but in the end we are just one of the 32. And Mark Rutte is not Prime Minister of the Netherlands anymore. He is a neutral Secretary General of NATO, and he fully understands that. So where we can, we try to help. And for example, with the Pearl initiative, we considered it to be a very important initiative because Ukraine needs those American weapon systems, and it was the only way to get them to Ukraine quickly. And Mark Rutte also said, it's very important now that some countries show their commitment. And then we were the ones that were the first to step in. But when you look at, for example, the defense spending, we are currently at 2.1%. We are definitely not the best in class. And there are the Baltic states, Poland, Nordic countries are doing much more. So we also have our political realities. We just had elections this week. I hope that the next government will create this path towards 3.5%. But still, if we do that according to what we agreed upon, we will definitely not be the best of class.
I want to pick up, we're coming to the end, but I just want to pick up on one thing you were saying a little earlier on, words the effect that the more Russia dominates Ukraine, the greater the danger to the Netherlands and to our NATO allies. What do you think President Putin's strategy is here? Where would he focus his sights on next, were Ukraine to somehow be forced into capitulation?
We know that he wants to re-establish the former sphere of influence of the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire. And we know, of course, that the Baltic states he considers the Baltic states to be part of that sphere of influence. Of course, also, if you look at the geographical position of the Baltic states, that is, of course, a vulnerable area. So we need to support them. That's why we are active in Lithuania. That's why we also had F-35s in Estonia not so long ago. So if you look at the current military plans of Russia and also the industrial plans, it's all going beyond Ukraine. So we already see now that Russia is hiring more people for the military than what they need in Ukraine. They are producing more than what they need in Ukraine. So they are already increasing their strategic stocks. We also know that in their military plans and in their industrial plans towards 2030, it's only going up, the numbers and scales only going up, much more than what they need in Ukraine. So if you know that Russia has the intentions to weaken the West and to divide our alliances and to restore their sphere of influence, if you know that they are building the military capabilities that are very dangerous, and they have the interest to continue their war machine because the economy depends on it, if you have those three things, intentions, military capabilities, and interest, then I think you need to take that threat very seriously.
Just lastly, you mentioned elections have just been held in the Netherlands. I think it's being dubbed the closest election in Dutch history. Just want to ask you for your reaction to what we know so far, and what lies ahead in terms of challenges with regards to forming a coalition.
Now it has become clear who won the elections. It was Rob Jetten from the party called D66. It's the first time they won the elections, so congratulations to them. I think they run a remarkable campaign. If I speak on behalf of my party, which is the VVD, more center-right party, and I'm not speaking as a minister, but more as a candidate that was on the list of my party, we said that we want to have a center-right coalition. And that center-right coalition with 4 parties could have a majority in parliament. So, for us it's very clear, the position of my party is very clear that we want to have this center-right coalition. But if the winner of the elections also thinks the same about it, and if so, how he wants to get there, the initiative is on his side, and we will see how long it takes. Normally, a formation process in the Netherlands takes around 6 months. Sometimes more, sometimes a bit less. I think there is a genuine desire to do it quicker because we have now 3 elections in just 4 or 5 years. So we could get there faster. I think what is important, though, is regardless of how long it takes, regardless of the outcome, in terms of defense policy, in terms of foreign policy, I expect that the course of the Netherlands will be very solid and will remain the same. So we will increase our defense spending, we will strengthen NATO alliance, our support to Ukraine is rock solid, So regardless of what's happening in terms of political turmoil in The Hague, what people outside of the Netherlands will see from us will be very clear and very similar.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Ruben Brekelmans, Minister of Defence for the Netherlands. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.